Hey, my name's Zane. I'm 25 and I'm a carpenter picking up freelance gigs around the outskirts of Colorado Springs. I live in a small wooden cabin tucked against a hill of pines, just me and my rescue dog Harley, a scruffy mutt who thinks he owns the place. It's not much, but it's home. The air smells like sap and sawdust, and most nights I'm out on the porch with a beer listening to the wind whistle through the trees. Life's simple. I fix furniture build decks, sometimes carve little wooden animals when I'm bored. I'm not chasing anything big, just enough to keep the lights on and Harley fed. I've always been the guy my friends mess with. They call me the lone wolf mostly because I'm still single while they're all paired up or posting about their dates on Instagram. I don't mind it much. Dating apps, small talk, the whole routine, it's never clicked for me. But my buddies, they think it's hilarious. They're always joking about my bachelor life, saying I'll end up married to my toolbox. Last week they took it up a notch. We're setting you up. My friend Derek texted on Friday night. Blind date. Sunday, 3 p.m. Lakeview coffee by the water. Trust us, you'll thank us later. I laughed it off. These guys have pulled stunts before, like the time they signed me up for a speed dating event, and I ended up stuck with a woman who talked about her pet iguana for 20 minutes straight. I figured this was another prank, something to laugh about over beers later. Fine, I texted back. But if this is another iguana lady, you're buying rounds for a month. Sunday rolled around and I almost bailed. I was halfway through sanding a cedar chair in my workshop, sawdust in my hair when I remembered the time. I didn't bother dressing up jeans, a flannel shirt, and my scuffed work boots would do. Lakeview Coffee's a cozy spot. All wooden beams and big windows facing the lake, the kind of place where locals linger with their laptops. I grabbed a table near the window, ordered a black coffee, and waited, half expecting Derek to jump out with a camera or some dumb sign. The clock ticked past 3:00. Nothing. I sipped my coffee, checked my phone. No texts? Typical. I was about ready to call it quits when the door chimed and she walked in. Her name was Elise. I didn't know that yet, but I knew she wasn't from my usual crowd. She was older, probably pushing 40, with brown hair swept up in a loose bun, strands curling softly around her neck. She wore a long floral dress that swayed as she moved, layered with a cream-colored cardigan that looked soft enough to sleep in. There was something about her calm, like she wasn't trying to prove anything. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on me. For a second I thought she'd keep looking, but she didn't. She walked straight over, her steps steady, and stopped at my table. Zane, she said, her voice light but warm, with a smile that felt like it could unravel you if you weren't careful. Yeah, I said, standing up too fast, nearly knocking over my coffee. That's me. You are... I trailed off, still half convinced this was a mix-up. She didn't look like someone my friends would set me up with. She looked like she belonged in a painting, not a prank. Elise, she said, pulling out the chair across from me. She sat down, folding her hands on the table, and gave me a look that was equal parts amused and curious. I'm guessing we're victims of the same joke. I blinked. Joke. She nodded, her smile widening. My friend Lisa, she's got a thing for playing matchmaker. Said I needed to get out more. Told me to show up here, meet some guy named Zane. I figured it was a setup, but... She shrugged, glancing around the cafe. Here I am. I laughed, the tension in my shoulders easing. Yeah, my buddies pulled the same stunt. Zane, you'll thank us, they said. I was expecting a prank, not... I stopped myself, not sure how to finish that sentence without sounding like an idiot. Not someone like you, I wanted to say, but I didn't. She tilted her head, studying me, not what... I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling the heat creep up. Not someone who looks like they actually know what they're doing, I said, hoping it sounded smoother than it felt. She laughed, a real laugh, not polite or forced, but the kind that makes you want to hear it again. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing, she said, leaning back in her chair. But I'm here. So, Zane, tell me, how'd you get roped into this? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, and for the first time that day, I wasn't thinking about my friends or their dumb bets. I was just there in that moment with her. The lake sparkled outside, the coffee smelled sharp and warm, and Elisa's eyes were steady, like she was actually listening. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the start of something I'd never seen coming. I don't know what I expected from that coffee shop meeting, but it wasn't this. Elise and I ended up talking for 2 hours straight, the kind of conversation that makes you forget the world's spinning. The cafe buzzed around us baristas calling out orders, the clink of mugs, the hum of some folk song on the speakers, but it all faded into the background. She had this way of listening, really listening, her eyes locked on mine, like she was piecing me together. I wasn't used to that. At most dates I'd been on, if you could call them, that were full of awkward silences or girls checking their phones, Elise was different. She was present like she had nowhere else to be. She told me she was 38, worked remotely writing ad copy for a marketing firm, and lived in a small house a few miles away with her mom, who was getting up there in years. "It's just us," she said, stirring her latte, her voice steady but soft. "Mom's got a sharp tongue, but her knees aren't what they used to be." I moved back to help out. There was no self-pity in her tone, just facts like she'd made peace with it. She mentioned she'd been married once years ago, but didn't linger on it. "Didn't work out," she said with a small shrug, her eyes flicking to the window. "Life's funny like that." I told her about my life, which felt small in comparison. Carpentry jobs here and there, fixing tables, building bookshelves, whatever people needed. I talked about Harley, my dog, who'd chew up half my furniture if I didn't keep him busy. "He's a rescue," I said. "Got him from a shelter 2 years ago. He's a mess, but he's my mess." Elise smiled, her lips curling like she could picture him. "Sounds like he's got you wrapped around his paw," she said, and I laughed because she wasn't wrong. Then I told her about the time I fixed a porch for an 87-year-old lady down the road. She had this cat, mean as hell, scratched my arm raw when I got too close to its food bowl. I rolled up my sleeve, showing her the faint scar on my forearm. Elise leaned forward, her fingers brushing the mark before she caught herself and pulled back. "That's a battle wound," she said, her voice warm with amusement. "You survived a killer cat. I'm impressed." Her laugh was low, genuine, and it hit me somewhere deep like a chord I didn't know I could feel. We swapped stories like that, bouncing from one to another. She told me about the time she wrote a jingle for a local car dealership, only for them to butcher it on the radio. "I swore I'd never do another one," she said, shaking her head, "but they paid me double to fix it." I told her about the time I built a treehouse for a kid, only to realize halfway through, I'd measured it wrong and had to start over. "The kid still thinks I'm a hero," I said, grinning. "His dad, not so much." The conversation wasn't forced. It wasn't like we were trying to impress each other. It just flowed like we'd known each other longer than an afternoon. I noticed little things about her, the way her hands moved when she talked quick and graceful, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled like she'd earned every line. She wasn't loud or flashy, but she had this quiet strength, like she'd seen enough of the world to know what mattered. I'd never felt so at ease with someone I'd just met, and it threw me off. She was older, sure, but it wasn't about that. It was about how she made me feel like I didn't have to be anything other than myself. When the barista started wiping down tables, hinting it was time to close, I realized we'd been there way past when I'd planned to leave. The sun was dipping low, painting the lake outside in shades of gold and pink. Elise glanced at her watch and laughed softly. "I didn't mean to keep you this long," she said, standing up and slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Your friends are probably waiting for a report." I stood too, scratching the back of my neck. "Yeah, they're gonna want details, probably think they're matchmakers now." I hesitated, not wanting the moment to end. This wasn't what I expected, I admitted, meeting her eyes. "I thought I'd be dodging a prank, not this." She tilted her head, her smile softening. "Not a bad prank." Then she said, her voice teasing but warm. We walked out together, the evening air cool against my skin. I wanted to ask for her number, but something held me back, like I wasn't sure I'd earned it yet. She paused by her car, a beat-up old Subaru that didn't match her at all, and looked at me. "Thanks for not bolting when I showed up," she said. "I had a good time, Zane." "Me too," I said, and I meant it. She gave me one last smile, got in her car, and drove off. I stood there for a minute, watching her taillights disappear around the bend, my coffee cold in my hand. I didn't know what this was, but it didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like the start of something I wasn't ready for, but didn't want to let go of either. I got home that night, tossed my keys on the counter, and flopped onto the couch. Harley jumped up, nudging my hand with his wet nose, expecting a scratch. I gave him one, but my mind was still back at the coffee shop, replaying Elise's laugh, the way her eyes caught the light when she talked. I kept waiting for the punchline, for Derek to call and say they'd set me up with someone's aunt for laughs, but my phone stayed quiet. No texts, no gloating. Just me, Harley, and the hum of the fridge in my cabin. I didn't text her that night, or the next day. I wanted to, but every time I typed something out, it felt wrong, like I was pushing too hard or reading too much into a single conversation. What if she was just being nice? What if she saw me as some kid who got roped into a dumb prank? I wasn't used to this second-guessing myself over a woman. Normally, I'd move on, keep things simple. But Elise wasn't simple. She was different, and it scared me a little. 2 days later, my phone buzzed while I was sanding a table in my workshop. Sawdust clung to my arms, and Harley was sprawled out in a patch of sunlight by the door. I wiped my hands on my jeans and checked the screen. A number I didn't know. Thanks for the unexpected coffee date, the message read. If you want to hear another story about feral cats scratching people, I'm free Thursday evening. My heart did a weird flip, and I laughed out loud, startling Harley. It was her. Elise, I typed back, fumbling over the words like a teenager. Only if you promise not to bring any cats? Thursday works? Name the place. She replied almost instantly, Lakefront Trail, 6 p.m. Bring Harley. I want to meet this famous dog. I grinned, shaking my head. She remembered Harley. Of course she did. Thursday evening, I leashed up Harley and headed to the Lakefront Trail, a winding path that hugged the water's edge, lined with pines and benches where people watched the sunset. I was nervous, which wasn't like me. I'd thrown on a clean flannel and jeans, but I kept checking my reflection in the truck's side mirror, like it mattered if my hair was out of place. Harley, oblivious, tugged at the leash, ready to chase squirrels. When I saw Elise, she was already there, sitting on a bench with a thermos in her hands, wearing a soft gray sweater and jeans. Her hair was down this time, curling just past her shoulders, and she looked up as Harley bounded toward her, tail wagging like a metronome. Wow, you weren't kidding about this guy, she said, laughing as Harley sniffed her hands. She scratched behind his ears, and he melted into her like they were old friends. He's a charmer. Takes after me, I said, sitting next to her, trying to play it cool. She raised an eyebrow, her smile teasing. We'll see about that. We started walking, Harley trotting between us. The air was crisp, the lake shimmering under the fading light. We didn't talk about anything heavy at first, just the trail, how Harley once ate half a sandwich I'd left on the counter, how Elise used to come here to clear her head after long workdays. But then she asked about my carpentry, and I found myself opening up more than I meant to. I told her about the first table I built, how it wobbled, because I didn't know what I was doing, how I kept at it, because I liked making things that lasted. She listened, nodding, asking questions that made me feel like she actually cared. Your work sounds honest, she said after a while, her voice thoughtful. Not many people do things with their hands anymore. It's grounding. I shrugged, a little embarrassed. It's just wood. Nothing fancy. It's not just wood, she said, stopping to look at me. You're building something real. That matters. Her eyes held mine steady and warm, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. We kept meeting after that. A dinner at my cabin one night where I grilled steaks, and she brought a bottle of red wine that was way better than the cheap stuff I usually bought. Another evening at a little art cafe downtown where we tried painting on tiny canvases and ended up with smudges of color on our hands, laughing like kids. Each time I learned a little more about her. She told me about her mom's love for old jazz records, how she'd play them loud on Sunday mornings. She mentioned her ex-husband in passing, not with anger, but like a chapter she'd closed. He wasn't a bad guy, she said once, staring at her wine glass. Just not the right one. I didn't push. I just listened the way she did for me. Those moments started to feel like something more. Not just friendly meetups, not just passing time. When she hugged me goodbye after the art cafe, her arms lingered a second longer than they needed to, and I caught myself smiling all the way home. I wasn't sure what we were doing, but I knew I didn't want it to stop. Harley seemed to agree. He'd wag his tail every time I mentioned her name. For the first time in a long time, my quiet little life didn't feel so quiet anymore. It felt full, like something was growing, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it or not. Those weeks with Elise started to blur into something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just the meetups, walks by the lake, dinners at my cabin, or the time we laughed our way through a pottery class ending up with lopsided mugs that looked like a kid made them. It was the way she fit into my days, like she'd always been there. I'd catch myself thinking about her while planning a board in my workshop, or when Harley would perk up at the sound of a car hoping it was hers. I wasn't used to this feeling, someone's presence, even when they were miles away. But with Elise, it was easy, natural like breathing. She started opening up more, letting me see the cracks beneath her calm exterior. One evening, while we sat on my porch with Harley sprawled at our feet, she told me about her marriage. It wasn't loud or messy, she said, staring at the pines silhouetted against the dusk. No yelling, no big fights, just distance. He stopped seeing me, and I stopped trying to be seen. Her voice was steady, but her fingers twisted the hem of her sweater, betraying the weight of it. After the divorce, I thought I'd be fine alone. I was mostly. But it's lonely, even when you're good at it. I didn't say much, just reached over and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back, and we sat there, the quiet between us, saying more than words could. We kept meeting our routines weaving together. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market picking out vegetables for dinner. A Sunday drive to a nearby trail where she teased me for tripping over a root and I teased her for overanalyzing a cloud that looked like a turtle. I started noticing how her laugh softened me, how her touch a brush of her hand on my arm. A quick hug made my chest tighten. I was falling for her, and it scared me. Not because she was older, but because it felt too real too fast. I'd always kept things light, easy. But Elise wasn't someone you could keep at arm's length. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon, and we were at the grocery store, a small market just outside town. We were in the bread aisle debating whether sourdough or rye was better for sandwiches when I noticed Elise tense up. Her hand resting lightly in mine went stiff. I followed her gaze and saw him, a guy maybe early 40s with a polished look, like he spent too much time in front of a mirror. He was holding hands with a woman, younger, maybe 25, her hair pulled into a high ponytail. They were laughing oblivious until he glanced our way and froze. "Elise," he said, his voice clipped like he'd been caught off guard. The woman next to him looked confused, her smile faltering. "Mark," Elise said, her tone cool but even. She didn't let go of my hand, but I felt her fingers tighten just a fraction. I knew who he was without her saying it. Her ex-husband. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing as they flicked from my face to our joined hands. "So," he said, a smirk, curling his lips, "this is your new style." The way he said it, like I was some fling, some kid she'd picked up to pass the time, made my jaw clench. The woman next to him shifted awkwardly, clearly sensing the tension. Elise didn't flinch. She tilted her chin up, her voice steady as steel. "This is Zane," she said, "and he's someone who makes me feel like I'm worth something." She looked at me, her eyes fierce and soft all at once, and I felt a surge of something: pride, anger, protectiveness. I squeezed her hand, stepping closer to her. Mark's smirk faded, but he didn't back down. "Well, good for you," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Didn't think you'd go for the rugged type." He gestured vaguely at my flannel and jeans like they were some kind of insult. I wanted to say something to wipe that smug look off his face. But Elise spoke first. "I didn't think I'd find someone who sees me," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "But life's funny like that." She turned to me, her expression softening. "Ready to go?" "Yeah," I said, my voice low but firm. I didn't look back at Mark as we walked away, but I could feel his eyes on us, the weight of his judgment. We didn't talk about it in the car. Elise stared out the window, her hands folded in her lap, but when I reached over and took one of them, she held on tight like I was anchoring her. That night back at my cabin, she was quieter than usual. We sat on the couch, a half-eaten pizza on the coffee table, Harley snoring in the corner. I didn't push her to talk, but I could feel the storm inside her. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes glassy but resolute. "He used to make me feel small," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I wasn't enough. Seeing him today, it reminded me of all that. But you." She reached out, touching my cheek. "You make me feel like I'm enough." I pulled her close, my arms wrapping around her, her head resting against my chest. "You're more than enough," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "And I'll keep reminding you every damn day if I have to." She didn't cry, but her body relaxed against mine like she was letting go of something heavy. In that moment, I knew I wasn't just falling for her. I was in deep, and I wanted to protect her from anything that ever made her doubt herself again. The weeks after the grocery store incident felt different, like something had shifted between Elise and me. It wasn't just about the walks or the dinners anymore. It was heavier, deeper, like we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. I didn't mind. I wanted to be there for her, not just in the easy moments, but in the ones that hurt too. We didn't talk about Mark again, but I could tell it lingered in her the way her shoulders tensed sometimes, or how she'd go quiet when a certain song played, like it carried memories she'd rather forget. I didn't push her to talk. I just stayed close, letting her know I wasn't going anywhere. One Friday evening, the sky turned dark early, heavy clouds rolling in over the pines. I was in my workshop sanding a bookshelf I'd been building for a client's sawdust, coating my hands, the air thick with the smell of cedar. Harley was curled up by the heater, his snores barely audible over the patter of rain starting to hit the roof. My phone buzzed a text from Elise. "Mind if I come over? I don't want to be alone tonight." My heart did that thing again, that quick thud that hadn't stopped since the coffee shop. "Doors open," I texted back. "Harley's ready to show off." 20 minutes later, I heard the crunch of gravel outside. I opened the door to find Elise standing there, her umbrella dripping, her hair damp where the rain had caught her. She wore a green sweater and jeans, the kind of outfit that made her look like she belonged in my cabin, not some fancy office. Her eyes were tired but steady, and she gave me a small smile as she shook off the umbrella. "Sorry for the drop-in," she said, stepping inside. "It's just one of those nights. You don't need to apologize," I said, taking her coat and hanging it by the door. "You okay?" She nodded, but it was the kind of nod that didn't quite convince me. I gestured to the couch where a blanket was already bunched up from my lazy afternoons with Harley. "Sit, I'll grab us something warm." I made tea, some herbal stuff she'd left at my place last week, and we settled by the window, the rain coming down harder now, a steady drum against the glass. Harley, sensing a guest, patted over and flopped at her feet, his tail thumping lazily. Elise scratched his ears, her smile softening. "He's got the right idea," she said. "Just exist, no questions asked." I sat next to her, close enough that our knees brushed. "You want to talk about it?" I asked, keeping my voice low like I was afraid to break the moment. She stared at the rain for a long time, her fingers wrapped around the mug. The steam curled up, catching the dim light of the lamp. "It's not one thing," she said finally. "It's everything. The divorce, moving back here, taking care of Mom. I've been okay. I'm good at being okay. But sometimes it hits me how long I went without feeling like I could be myself. Like I was allowed to want something more." She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "Then you showed up, Zane. And I'm starting to believe I can." I set my mug down my throat tight. I wasn't good with words, not like her. I built things, fixed things, but this was new. "You don't have to do it alone," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. "Whatever it is, I'm here." She looked at me, her expression soft but raw, like she was peeling back layers she'd kept hidden for years. "I haven't felt this safe in a long time," she said, almost a whisper. "I stopped believing in love after him. I thought it was just stories. But you?" She paused, her hand reaching for mine, her fingers cool from the mug. "You make me want to try again." I didn't think. I just leaned in my hand, finding the back of her neck, and kissed her. It wasn't rushed or desperate, but slow, deliberate, like we were both saying something we'd been holding back. Her lips were soft, tasting faintly of chamomile, and when she kissed me back, it felt like the world outside the cabin didn't exist, just us, the rain, in this moment. When we pulled apart, her forehead rested against mine, her breath uneven. "Zane," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'm scared this is too good to be real." I tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, my thumb brushing her cheek. "It's real," I said, "and I'm not going anywhere." She leaned into me, her head settling against my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. The rain kept falling, steady and unrelenting, but inside it was warm, quiet, full. Harley let out a soft huff, like he approved, and we stayed like that for a long time, her hand in mine, the weight of her words settling into me. That night, she didn't leave. We talked until the rain slowed to a drizzle, about nothing and everything: her mom's old recipe for peach cobbler, the time I accidentally built a chair backward, how Harley once stole a whole loaf of bread off the counter. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way she looked at me, like I wasn't just some guy who stumbled into her life. For the first time, the age difference didn't feel like a gap. It felt like a bridge, one we built together step by step. I didn't know where this was going, but I knew I wanted her there beside me for as long as she'd let me.